Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila again with this week's story. It's called Miracle from the Sky. Well, this story took place a long time ago, many years ago. But it happened in the very center of the continent of Africa. Now, this wasn't where the jungles were. This was where there were some forests, but there was also a pretty dry part of Africa. The missionary and his wife had gone, and they had been able to purchase 40 acres. They wanted to tell the people there about Jesus. And on that 40 acres, they built a mission compound. It had a school and places for the teachers and everyone to live. And every year they planted gardens. And they were able to plant more than one crop a year on their land. So the mission was basically self-sufficient. There was always enough food out of the gardens to feed all the children that came as students and all the faculty that was there and teachers. The missionary, he had gone off to see what they called the out schools. Well, all around this mission, out in the villages, all the way around, there were little schools here and there with teachers that had been taught by the people at the mission. And they were people that had always lived there in Africa. So they understood the children there. Well, he had gone off to make his rounds through those little schools to see if they needed any help or if there was anything at all that he could do for them. And he left his wife in charge there at the mission. Well, there was 52 people at the school right then. And she had gone into the kitchen in the cafeteria. You know, the staple food there in the center of Africa was what they called millie meal. Now, millie meal was like a white corn that they had dried and ground into like a cornmeal. And that was their staple food. But the containers of mealie meal were all empty. The cupboards were all empty of food. There was nothing for them to cook for the children. She thought, what can we do? Then she remembered all the promises in the Bible that God had given her and to us. She called all the other staff members together and she told them that they had no more food and there was no money to go out. There really wasn't a place right there to go out and buy any anyway. She said, we need to pray earnestly to God. You know, He's promised enough for this day. This day's food, He's promised. We need to pray to Him. I know that somehow He'll answer our prayers. So all of those people got down and they earnestly prayed to God. Now, if you had nothing at all to eat, what kind of a prayer would you pray? Would you just go, Jesus, we need some food, thank you? I don't think so. I think you would kneel down and you would plead with God. You know we're here doing your work, Father. Please, we need food for the children. We need food for the staff. You know that there's a drought on now. And you know we had faithfully planted all our gardens, but all the plants have shriveled up and died because there's no water in the watering place. And there's no rain, and the ground is dry and cracked open. Father, please look down and see what's going on here in Africa. Please send us help. We're not asking for specific things because we know that you can bless us. You can send food, you can make food out of nothing. Please, Father, we thank you. We claim your promises in the Bible. We claim the stories that you had recorded there so we would know what you could do. Thank you, dear Father. Well, they all got up and they went about their work. And I'm sure as they were working, they talked to God about it. Well, the missionary, she went in to clean up from what little breakfast they had had that morning. She kept thinking, we can trust God. We can trust God. Well, her door to that kitchen was open, and she could see out in what used to be the yard. Now it was just dirt. And she could see her little girl. Her little girl was 8. And her little girl was doing something strange. She had something in her hand, and she was putting it in her mouth, and she was chewing, and she was smiling, and she just kept picking whatever that was up and eating. And the mother, the missionary, she knew that there was nothing out there to eat. What was her daughter eating? Was it something that wasn't going to be good for her? Well, she rushed to the door and she said, "Honey, what are you eating?" And the little girl smiled and said, "Mommy, it's so good." And then she said, "Mommy, there were 2 European men. They were white just like us. And they came to the gate of the mission and they told me that God had heard your prayer and he was sending food. And then they told me, go out and pick up this stuff. Mama, they called it manna. And they said, you eat." And I have been. It's so good, Mama. The missionary, she went out and she looked around. And sure enough, all over the ground, just like snow, but bigger, was little round white things. And the missionary's wife, "Manna, God sent us manna, just like the story in the Bible. He sent manna when Moses prayed for the children of Israel to have food. Oh, God sent us manna." So she rushed in and she got a pot and she told her little girl, "Help me pick it up." And then she rushed around to all the ladies and said, "Come, let's pick up all the manna, everything you can find." And they did, pot after pot after pot. And the missionary, she sent a message to her husband and said, "Oh, come home quick. We've had a miracle. Come home quick." And he did. He came right home and he saw those big pots full of manna. And he walked that 40 acres. There was only manna on the mission's 40 acres. There was no manna out there, outside of the gates. Well, the men helped pick it up as well. And it wasn't like in the Bible. In the Bible, God had told the people to just pick up as much as they could eat. And if they picked up more than that, when they got up in the morning, it stunk. Ooh, it was rotten and it had worms crawling through it. But this manna didn't rot. They kept gathering for 3 days. The sky rained manna on that 40 acres. 3 days. And in 3 days, everybody, students, teachers, everybody, spent those 3 days picking up every speck of manna that they could see all over that 40 acres. And they stored it. At the end of 3 days, there was no more manna, but they calculated it out, and they had enough manna, they thought, to last through a drought. It was amazing. The missionary, he looked at his wife and he said, God is so good. I need to tell the head pastors at the division office. That was where the conference office was for the church that they worked for. But do you suppose they'll believe my story of this much manna and that it only fell for 3 days and it's not rotting? Do you suppose they'll believe? And his wife said, well, why don't you send them a bowl full? Because the next day he was supposed to send in his reports about all the outlying little schools and about their mission. So with those reports went out a container full of manna. Now, do you remember, boys and girls, what the people, the children of Israel, called manna? The word manna meant, what is it? Well, it was food from heaven. Food, a miracle from the sky. Well, when that division office got that package and they opened it up, and on top was the story that the missionary pastor had written. They read it. Then they looked in that bowl and they each reached down and took a tiny particle and they tasted it. Just like the Bible said, it tasted like honey and wafers. It was delicious. And all those pastors there said, God has sent a miracle for them, just like in the Bible. Well, boys and girls, our Bible is clear full of stories that were put there by God so we would know what He could and wanted to do for us. Remember the story of Elijah where there was a drought there and God sent birds, big ravens, to bring him food? And then when it was too dry there for there to be any water in the brook, He sent him to a widow lady who was just gone outside to gather a couple sticks because she had the last bit of flour that she had in the house, and they were in the midst of a drought, and there was just a dribble of oil in the bottom, and she was going to make one cake. But God had other ideas. He sent Elijah there, and Elijah said, well, make a cake for me. And she believed him. All during that famine, boys and girls, there was always meal or flour container, and there was always oil, enough for her boy and her and Elijah. The Bible is just full. And the reason why God gave us the Bible was so that we could read it and see how He took care of all the people in the past. And He's going to take care of us too. All we have to do is ask Him. God is so wonderful. He wants you to read the Bible to see what He's done before. And boys and girls, I almost forgot. Boys and girls, when I was a young lady, there was a missionary that came to our church one church service, and he had been to Africa. And he told us the story about the manna that fell from the sky. And he was so excited because he had seen that little pot of manna that years and years before the missionary had sent to the conference office. Boys and girls, God is still working today. All you have to do is ask Him and believe that He'll do it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, boys and girls.